The forbidden glance. The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the marble floors of the Romano estate, where Boston's elite gathered for what everyone called a charity event but what Vincent Romano knew was a carefully orchestrated display of power. He stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his eyes scanning the crowd with the practiced efficiency of a man who had built an empire on reading people and situations. The Romano name commanded respect, fear, and absolute loyalty throughout the city, and Vincent had spent 15 years ensuring that legacy remained untarnished. His younger sister Isabella moved through the crowd like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, her emerald gown flowing as she greeted guests with genuine warmth. At 26, she possessed their mother's beauty and their father's sharp intelligence, but unlike Vincent, she had been shielded from the darker aspects of their family business. Their father had insisted on it before he passed, making Vincent promise to keep Isabella innocent, to let her live a normal life despite the Romano name she carried. Vincent had honored that promise, sending her to the finest schools, encouraging her passion for art restoration, and keeping her far from the meetings where decisions were made that could never be unmade. Isabella paused near the orchestra, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She had always loved these events, not for the display of wealth or the networking opportunities that made Vincent's associates salivate, but for the art that adorned the walls and the stories each piece told. Her degree in art history from Columbia had been hard-earned, and she now worked as a restoration consultant for several prestigious museums, a career that brought her joy and gave her identity beyond being Vincent Romano's sister. Across the room, Nathan Cross adjusted his tie and tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in his stomach the moment he walked through the Romano estate's imposing iron gates. He had built his construction company from nothing, turning a small crew and a battered truck into one of Boston's most successful development firms through honest work and fair dealing. The invitation to this gala had surprised him, but his business partner had insisted it was an opportunity to network with potential investors. Nathan had his doubts about mixing with this crowd, but he had learned long ago that success sometimes meant stepping outside his comfort zone. He noticed her immediately, the woman in the emerald dress who seemed to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the chandeliers overhead. She was examining a painting on the far wall, her head tilted slightly as if listening to secrets the artwork whispered. Nathan found himself drawn toward her, weaving through clusters of conversation until he stood beside her, both of them gazing at the Renaissance portrait of a young woman holding a single white rose. Isabella felt his presence before he spoke, a shift in the air that made her turn. He was tall, with kind eyes that contrasted sharply with the calculating gazes she was accustomed to seeing at these gatherings. His suit was expensive but not ostentatious, and he wore it with the slight discomfort of a man more at home in work boots than Italian leather shoes. "Remarkable, is it not?" Isabella said softly, gesturing to the painting. The artist captured something beyond beauty. You can see the sadness in her eyes, the weight of choices she cannot make. Nathan studied the portrait with new appreciation. "I never learned much about art," he admitted. "I build things, fix things. But I can see what you mean." She looks trapped somehow, even though she is smiling. Their conversation flowed naturally, moving from art to architecture, from Isabella's restoration work to Nathan's latest project converting an abandoned warehouse into affordable housing. They talked for nearly an hour, oblivious to the curious glances from other guests and the way Vincent's attention had slowly shifted to his sister's animated conversation with a stranger. When Nathan finally asked her name, Isabella hesitated for just a moment. "Isabella," she said, leaving off the Romano surname that carried so much weight and expectation. "And you?" "Nathan Cross. I own Cross Construction." He smiled, and Isabella noticed how it transformed his entire face, making him seem younger, less burdened. Vincent appeared at Isabella's elbow so smoothly it seemed like magic, though she recognized the protective instinct that brought him. "Bella," he said, his voice warm but carrying an undertone that made Nathan straighten slightly. "I hope you are enjoying yourself." "Vincent, this is Nathan Cross." "Nathan, my brother Vincent." Isabella made the introduction with practiced ease, but her heart had begun to race. She saw the moment recognition flickered in Nathan's eyes, the subtle shift in his posture as he connected the dots between Vincent Romano and the whispered stories that circulated through Boston's business community. Vincent extended his hand, and Nathan shook it firmly, meeting the Mafia boss's gaze without flinching. "Mr. Romano. Your family's support for the arts is well known. This is quite an event. We believe in giving back to the community," Vincent replied smoothly. "Cross-construction. You are the one developing the South End project, providing housing for working families." Nathan nodded, surprised that Vincent knew his work. "We break ground next month. It has been a long process, but worth it to create something that helps people rather than just making profit." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, an assessment being made and filed away. He turned to Isabella. "The auction begins in 10 minutes. Mother wants you at the family table." It was a dismissal, polite but absolute. Isabella felt rebellion stir in her chest, a feeling she had learned to suppress over the years. But before she could respond, Nathan spoke. "It was wonderful meeting you, Isabella. Perhaps we could continue our conversation another time. I would love to hear more about your restoration work." He handed her his business card, a simple gesture that felt weighted with possibility. Isabella took it, her fingers brushing his, and smiled. "I would like that very much." As Nathan walked away, Vincent watched him go with the intensity of a predator tracking movement in the shadows. "He seems pleasant enough," Isabella said lightly, tucking the card into her small purse. "Pleasant men do not usually survive in this city," Vincent replied quietly. "Be careful, Bella. Not everyone is who they appear to be." But as Isabella took her seat at the family table, surrounded by the weight of Romano expectations and traditions, she could not stop thinking about the man with kind eyes who built homes for working families and admitted he knew nothing about art. For the first time in years, she felt the stirring of something beyond the carefully constructed life she had been living, a possibility that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Across the ballroom, Nathan tried to focus on his business partner's introductions to potential investors, but his mind kept returning to the woman in the emerald dress. He had no illusions about who the Romanos were or what getting involved with Vincent Romano's sister might mean. But when Isabella had smiled at him, genuinely interested in his work and his ideas, he had felt something shift inside him, a recognition that some connections were worth any risk. Neither of them could have known that this brief encounter would set in motion events that would challenge everything they believed about family, loyalty, and the power of choosing your own path. The Romano Empire had stood unchallenged for decades, built on blood and silence and unbreakable rules. But Isabella had always been the one exception to Vincent's ruthless pragmatism, the soft place in his armor that even he did not fully understand. As the auction began and champagne flowed, the seeds of something dangerous and beautiful had been planted, waiting for the right moment to bloom into a love that would test the very foundations of the Romano family and force Vincent to choose between the sister he had sworn to protect and the legacy he had built his entire life defending. Secrets and shadows. The following 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and carefully orchestrated meetings that felt both thrilling and dangerous. Isabella found herself checking her phone constantly, waiting for Nathan's messages that arrived like clockwork each morning. They were simple at first, asking about her day or sharing a funny observation about a construction mishap, but gradually they deepened into conversations about dreams, disappointments, and the versions of themselves they showed the world versus who they truly were inside. Their first official meeting happened at a small coffee shop in Cambridge, far from the watchful eyes of anyone who might recognize Isabella Romano. She arrived early, her heart racing as she chose a corner table where they could talk privately. When Nathan walked through the door, still wearing his work clothes and carrying the faint scent of sawdust and fresh air, Isabella felt something settle in her chest, a rightness that she had never experienced before. Nathan slid into the seat across from her, his smile wide and genuine. "I was worried you would not come," he admitted, ordering coffee from the passing waitress. "After the gala, I thought maybe I had imagined how easy it was to talk to you." Isabella wrapped her hands around her cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. "I almost did not," she confessed. "My life is complicated in ways that are difficult to explain. My family has expectations, traditions that go back generations. Getting close to someone outside that world feels like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there is ground below." Nathan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. "Then we take it slow. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads." They talked for 3 hours that afternoon, losing track of time as the coffee shop filled and emptied around them. Isabella told him about her mother, who had passed away when she was 16, leaving behind a hole that nothing seemed to fill. She spoke about her passion for bringing damaged art back to life, finding beauty in broken things and giving them new purpose. Nathan shared stories of growing up in Southie, the son of a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night so he could have better opportunities. He described the satisfaction of building something tangible, of creating spaces where families could thrive and communities could grow stronger. What struck Isabella most was Nathan's honesty about his limitations and failures. He did not pretend to be someone he was not, did not try to impress her with exaggerated accomplishments or connections. When she asked about his previous relationships, he was frank about a broken engagement 2 years earlier, a woman who had wanted the successful businessman but not the man who still got his hands dirty on construction sites and insisted on paying his workers above market rates. Their meetings became more frequent, always in places where they were unlikely to encounter anyone from Isabella's world. They walked through the public garden as autumn leaves painted the ground in gold and crimson. They attended a small gallery opening in Somerville where Isabella explained the techniques behind each painting while Nathan listened with genuine interest. They shared meals at neighborhood restaurants where the food was simple but delicious and nobody cared about designer labels or family names. Isabella knew she was falling for him, could feel it in the way her entire day brightened when his name appeared on her phone, in how she found herself wanting to share every small observation or random thought with him. But beneath the joy ran a current of fear because she understood what her brother would say if he discovered this relationship. Vincent had always been protective, but since their father's death, that protection had intensified into something closer to control, benevolent but absolute. Vincent Romano sat in his study, reviewing reports that his security team had compiled over the past 2 weeks. The name Nathan Cross appeared with alarming frequency, always in connection with his sister. Meetings at coffee shops, walks through parks, dinners at restaurants that Vincent would never have imagined Isabella frequenting. He had initially dismissed it as curiosity, a brief fascination that would burn itself out naturally. But the pattern suggested something deeper, something that set off warning bells in his carefully calibrated instincts. He summoned Thomas Greco, his most trusted advisor and the man who had served their father for 30 years. Thomas entered the study with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew when to speak and when to simply listen. "Tell me about Nathan Cross," Vincent said without preamble, sliding a folder across the desk. Thomas opened it, though Vincent suspected he already knew the contents by heart. Self-made businessman, built Cross Construction from nothing. Excellent reputation, pays his debts, treats his workers fairly. No criminal record, no questionable associations. By all accounts, exactly what he appears to be, a decent man trying to do honest work. And his interest in my sister? Thomas chose his words carefully. He seems genuinely drawn to her. Our people have observed them together. There is no indication of ulterior motives, no evidence he knows who she really is or what being a Romano means in this city. Vincent stood and walked to the window overlooking the estate gardens where he and Isabella had played as children, before their world became complicated by legacy and responsibility. That makes it worse, Thomas. If he were using her, I could deal with that cleanly. But if this is real, if she is falling for someone who exists completely outside our world, then we have a problem that cannot be solved with money or pressure. She is 26, Vincent. At some point, she will make her own choices about her life and her heart. Vincent's jaw tightened. Our father made me promise to keep her safe, to protect her from the ugliness that comes with our name. How do I honor that promise if she chooses someone who could expose her to dangers he does not even know exist? Thomas had no answer to that, because they both understood the impossible position Vincent occupied. His love for Isabella was genuine and deep, perhaps the only purely good thing left in a life built on morally ambiguous decisions. But that same love made him ruthless in his protection, unable to see that shielding her from every possible harm also meant denying her the chance to truly live. Meanwhile, Nathan was facing his own moment of reckoning. His business partner, James Sullivan, had pulled him aside after a meeting with investors, his expression troubled. "I need to talk to you about something, and you are not going to like it." They went to Nathan's office, a modest space filled with blueprints and photographs of completed projects. James closed the door and leaned against the desk. "The woman you have been seeing, Isabella. Do you know who she is?" Nathan felt his stomach drop. "She told me her name is Isabella Romano. I know her brother is Vincent Romano, and I know what people say about their family. But I also know the woman I have spent time with, and she is nothing like those rumors suggest." James ran his hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "Nathan, Vincent Romano is not just a businessman with a tough reputation. He runs one of the most powerful crime families in New England. Money laundering, protection rackets, God knows what else. The feds have been trying to build a case against him for years but can never make anything stick because people are too terrified to testify. Isabella is not part of that," Nathan said firmly, but doubt had begun to creep into his voice. "She works at museums, restores art. She is kept separate from whatever her brother does." "Maybe so, but her brother is not going to see it that way. To him, you are either a threat or a fool, and either way, you are a problem that needs handling. I am telling you this as your friend and your partner. Walk away before this goes somewhere you cannot come back from." Nathan spent that night walking the streets of his old neighborhood, wrestling with what he had learned. Part of him wanted to heed James's warning, to recognize that some complications were not worth the risk. But every time he thought about Isabella's laugh, the way she lit up when talking about her work, the vulnerability in her eyes when she shared pieces of her guarded heart, he knew walking away was not really an option anymore. He called her the next evening, his voice serious. "We need to talk. Really talk, about your family and what it means for us." They met at the waterfront, watching the sun set over the harbor as ships moved slowly across the darkening water. Isabella had known this conversation was coming, had been preparing herself for the moment when Nathan would confront the reality of what being with her truly meant. "I know who your brother is," Nathan said quietly. "I know what the Romano name represents in this city. And I need to understand where you fit into all of that, because what I feel for you is real, Isabella. But I cannot build something real on foundations of secrets and half-truths." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Vincent has kept me separate from the business since our father died. I know what he does, the choices he makes, but I am not part of those decisions. I restore art, I live my own life, and I have tried so hard to be more than just a Romano." "But you are a Romano," Nathan said gently. "And your brother is not going to accept someone like me being close to you. I build affordable housing and treat my workers like human beings. I am not powerful enough or connected enough or ruthless enough to exist in his world." "Then we create our own world," Isabella said fiercely, grabbing his hands. "I am tired of living in the shadows of my family's choices, of being protected and controlled and kept in a cage made of good intentions. With you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in my life. Please do not ask me to give that up." Nathan pulled her close, feeling the trembling in her body as she fought against tears. He knew this was the moment that would define everything that followed, the choice that would either lead to happiness or disaster. "I am not asking you to give up anything," he whispered against her hair. "I am just saying we need to be honest about what we are walking into. Because loving you means eventually facing your brother, and I need you to be ready for that confrontation." Isabella nodded against his chest, breathing in his scent of sawdust and clean cotton. I know. And when that time comes, I will stand with you. Whatever Vincent says, whatever threats he makes, I will not let him tear us apart. They held each other as darkness settled over the harbor, two people choosing love despite knowing the price it might demand. Neither of them noticed the black sedan parked 50 yards away, or the man inside taking photographs that would reach Vincent Romano's desk before midnight. The wheels were already in motion, forces gathering that would soon bring everything to a crisis point where silence would no longer be an option and choices would have to be made that could never be undone. In his study, Vincent stared at the photos of his sister in Nathan Cross's arms, feeling something crack inside his carefully constructed control. He had always known this day might come, the day when Isabella would choose her own path regardless of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But knowing it intellectually and seeing proof of it were two entirely different things. He reached for his phone, then stopped, his hand hovering over the device. Destroying Nathan Cross would be simple, a few well-placed calls and the man's business would collapse, his reputation ruined, his life made so difficult that walking away from Isabella would seem like the only rational choice. Vincent had done worse for far less compelling reasons. But looking at the photo, seeing the genuine happiness on his sister's face, he hesitated. Because eliminating Nathan would not eliminate what Isabella felt, it would only turn her love into resentment and drive a wedge between them that might never heal. For the first time in 15 years of running the Romano Empire, Vincent Romano found himself facing a problem that could not be solved with power, money, or fear. And that realization terrified him more than any rival or federal investigation ever had. The breaking point. The Romano family gathering happened on the last Sunday of every month, a tradition their father had established decades ago to maintain unity and demonstrate strength. Isabella had always attended dutifully, sitting through elaborate meals where business was discussed in coded language and alliances were reinforced through carefully orchestrated conversations. But this month, as she dressed in her usual elegant attire, she felt different. The weight of her secret relationship with Nathan had grown heavier with each passing day, and she knew the moment of reckoning was approaching faster than she was ready for. Vincent had been watching her carefully over the past week, his dark eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her nervous. He had said nothing directly, made no accusations or demands, but Isabella knew her brother well enough to recognize the signs of a storm building on the horizon. The careful way he asked about her work, the pointed questions about how she spent her free time, the sudden appearance of additional security following her to the museum all pointed to one unavoidable conclusion. He knew about Nathan, or at least suspected enough to be concerned. The gathering took place at the family estate, the same mansion where Isabella had grown up surrounded by beauty and secrets. She arrived to find the usual collection of relatives and associates already assembled in the formal dining room. Her uncle Roberto sat at one end of the table, his silver hair perfectly groomed and his expression carrying the permanent cynicism of someone who had seen too much darkness. Cousin Marco was there with his wife Sophia, both dressed impeccably and wearing the practiced smiles of people who understood that family dinners were performances as much as meals. Vincent sat at the head of the table in the chair that had belonged to their father, commanding the room with quiet authority. He smiled when Isabella entered, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. "Bella, you look beautiful as always. Come, sit. We were just discussing the new gallery opening downtown." Isabella took her seat, accepting a glass of wine from the attending server. The conversation flowed around her, touching on business ventures and social obligations, charitable foundations and political connections. She participated when required, offering opinions on art acquisitions and museum exhibitions, but her mind kept drifting to Nathan. They had plans to meet later that evening at his apartment, their first truly private time together away from public spaces and watchful eyes. Halfway through the main course, Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression unchanging, then set it face down on the table. "Isabella, I have been meaning to ask you something. Do you remember the cross-construction development project we discussed at the charity gala?" Isabella felt her heart skip, but she kept her voice steady. I remember you mentioning it briefly. Why do you ask? I have been considering investing in the project. It seems like a worthwhile venture, providing affordable housing for working families. Very noble, very admirable. Vincent cut into his steak with precise movements. I thought perhaps you might know something about the man running it. Nathan Cross. You spoke with him quite extensively at the gala. The table had gone quiet, all attention focused on this exchange. Isabella recognized the trap being set but saw no way around it except through. I spoke with him briefly about his work. He seemed passionate about what he does, genuinely committed to helping people rather than just making profit. Passionate, Vincent repeated, tasting the word. Yes, passion can be a powerful motivator. It can also cloud judgment, make people take risks they should not take, cross lines they should not cross. Uncle Roberto leaned forward, his weathered face creasing with interest. This Cross, he is the one who turned down our offer to use Romano suppliers for his project, is he not? Said something about maintaining independence and avoiding conflicts of interest. Vincent nodded slowly. He did indeed. A man of principle, apparently. Though one must wonder if such rigid principles are sustainable in the real world, where compromise and cooperation are often necessary for survival. Isabella set down her fork, feeling anger begin to replace her nervousness. Perhaps some people believe that integrity matters more than convenience. That not every decision should be made based on what is profitable or politically advantageous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Cousin Marco coughed uncomfortably, while Sophia suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. Vincent turned to face Isabella fully, his expression unreadable. Integrity is important, Bella. But so is loyalty. So is understanding that the choices we make affect more than just ourselves. They impact everyone connected to us, everyone who depends on us. Is that what you tell yourself? Isabella heard herself say, the words emerging before she could stop them. That controlling every aspect of my life is about protecting the family? Or is it about maintaining power, about making sure nothing exists outside your influence? The silence that followed was absolute. In 15 years of family gatherings, Isabella had never directly challenged Vincent, never questioned his authority or his decisions. She saw shock register on her uncle's face, saw Marco and Sophia exchange worried glances. But she kept her eyes on her brother, watching as he processed this unprecedented rebellion. Vincent stood slowly, his movements controlled and deliberate. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. Everyone else, please enjoy your meal. Isabella, my study. Now. Isabella rose, her legs trembling but her resolve firm. She followed Vincent through the familiar hallways of the estate, past family portraits and expensive artwork that suddenly felt like monuments to a life she no longer wanted. In the study, Vincent closed the door and turned to face her, and for the first time, Isabella saw genuine emotion break through his carefully maintained composure. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been seeing Nathan Cross? 2 months, Isabella admitted, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. We met at the gala and started talking, and it grew into something real. Something that makes me happy in a way I have never experienced before. Vincent moved to his desk, opening a drawer and pulling out a folder. He spread photographs across the mahogany surface, images of Isabella and Nathan at coffee shops, walking through parks, standing close together at the waterfront. Happy, he repeated, his voice tight with controlled fury. You risked everything we have built, everything our father died protecting, for happiness with a man you barely know? I know him better than I know most of the people at that dinner table, Isabella shot back. I know his values, his dreams, his honest struggle to build something good in a world that rewards ruthlessness. And yes, that makes me happy. It makes me feel alive instead of existing as a beautiful object to be protected and displayed. Vincent slammed his hand on the desk, making the photographs jump. You think this is about control? About keeping you as some trophy? Bella, I have spent 15 years shielding you from the reality of what our name means, the enemies we have made, the threats that exist every single day. Our father made me promise to keep you safe, and I have honored that promise even when it cost me personally. I never asked for that protection, Isabella said, tears now streaming down her face. I never asked to be kept in ignorance while you made decisions that affect our entire family. You want to honor father's memory? Then honor his belief that I was strong enough to make my own choices, smart enough to navigate my own life. And what about Nathan Cross? Vincent demanded. What happens when your relationship becomes public knowledge? When our enemies decide that hurting him is a way to hurt me, to hurt this family? Have you thought about the target you are painting on his back simply by being with him? Isabella felt that barb land because it was the fear that haunted her quiet moments. Then help me protect him. Use your power and your influence to keep him safe instead of trying to drive him away. Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to protect someone who exists completely outside our world, who has made it clear he wants nothing to do with our business or our methods? Bella, you are asking for something impossible. I am asking my brother to trust me, Isabella said softly. To believe that I can love someone and still be loyal to this family. To understand that keeping me locked in a cage, no matter how beautiful, is not protection. It is just another form of prison. Vincent turned away, staring out the window at the manicured gardens below. For long moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "Bring him here. Next Sunday, to the family dinner. Let me meet this man who has captured my sister's heart. Let me see if he is strong enough to survive in our world." Isabella felt hope flare in her chest. You mean it? You will give him a chance? I mean I will meet him, Vincent corrected, his voice hard. What happens after that depends entirely on what I see. But understand this, Bella. If I decide he is a threat to you or to this family, I will remove that threat. That is not negotiable. It was not the acceptance Isabella had hoped for, but it was more than she had expected. She crossed the room and hugged her brother, feeling him stiffen before slowly returning the embrace. Thank you, Vincent. I know this is difficult for you. You have no idea, he murmured against her hair. No idea what it costs me to even consider this. But I love you, and I want you to be happy. I just pray that your happiness does not destroy you. Isabella left the estate that evening feeling both triumphant and terrified. She drove directly to Nathan's apartment, a modest space in a converted warehouse that reflected his practical nature and honest lifestyle. When he opened the door, she fell into his arms, the weight of the confrontation finally hitting her. Nathan held her while she cried, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances. When she finally pulled back and told him about the conversation with Vincent, about the invitation to family dinner, she saw fear flicker across his face before determination replaced it. I will go, he said firmly. I will meet your brother and your family, and I will show them that I love you for who you are, not what your name means. But Isabella, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this does not end well. Your brother has built his entire life on control and power. Accepting someone like me into your world challenges everything he believes about protection and loyalty. I know, Isabella whispered. But I also know that I cannot keep living in the shadows, pretending that my heart does not exist outside the boundaries Vincent has set. Whatever happens at that dinner, at least we will face it together. They spent that night talking about worst-case scenarios and best-case outcomes, making plans and contingencies for every possibility they could imagine. Nathan was realistic about the dangers, about Vincent's capacity for ruthlessness when he felt his family was threatened. But he was also clear that walking away was not an option anymore, that loving Isabella meant accepting all the complications that came with her name and her legacy. The following Sunday arrived far too quickly. Nathan dressed carefully in his best suit, the one he saved for major business presentations and important meetings. Isabella picked him up in her car, and they drove to the Romano estate in tense silence, both lost in their own anxieties about what awaited them. The mansion loomed before them, impressive and intimidating in equal measure. As they walked to the entrance, Nathan took Isabella's hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever happens in there, remember that I love you. Remember that we chose this together." The butler opened the door, leading them through marble hallways to the formal dining room where the family had already assembled. Vincent stood at the head of the table, and when Nathan entered, the Mafia boss's dark eyes assessed him with an intensity that felt physical. Uncle Roberto, cousin Marco, and the others watched with varying expressions of curiosity and concern. Isabella moved to make introductions, but Vincent raised his hand, stopping her. He walked slowly toward Nathan, and the room held its collective breath. Nathan met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite understanding exactly who and what he was facing. "Mr. Cross," Vincent said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "My sister tells me you make her happy. That you are an honest man trying to do good work in a complicated world. Is this true?" "It is," Nathan replied, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "I love Isabella for who she is, not what her family name represents. And I would never do anything to hurt her or put her in danger." Vincent studied him for another long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the room. He extended his hand. "Then welcome to our table. Let us eat and talk, and see if we can find common ground between your world and mine." As Nathan shook Vincent's hand, Isabella felt tears of relief streaming down her face. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. A chance for love to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. The silence that had filled the room transformed into murmured conversations and the clinking of glasses, life resuming after a moment when everything could have gone terribly wrong. But as they took their seats and the meal began, both Isabella and Nathan understood that this was just the first step in a much longer journey. Trust would have to be earned, boundaries negotiated, and sacrifices made. Vincent's willingness to meet Nathan did not erase the fundamental tensions between the life Isabella had been born into and the life she was choosing to build. Yet as Nathan's hand found hers under the table and Vincent watched them with an expression that mixed resignation with cautious hope, there was a sense that love had won a crucial battle even if the war was far from over. In a world built on silence and secrets, Isabella had chosen to speak her truth, and somehow, miraculously, the room had not crumbled around her. Instead, it had simply paused, holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next.